These are the techniques that have left their mark on mixed martial arts history. Alexei Oleinik, the Ezekiel choke. It's one thing to popularize a technique and put your own spin on it, but for Alexei Oleinik, he's the only fighter in UFC history to score an Ezekiel choke inside the octagon, and he did it twice. But over the course of his entire MMA career, Oleinik has hit this exact submission a grand total of 14 times, making him by far and away the leading representative for this move. It's an odd choke that often requires you to allow yourself to be mounted by your opponent before locking them into a choke that they never see coming, and Oleinik does it better than anyone. Conor McGregor, the left cross. Conor McGregor might just have the most effective left hand we've ever seen in mixed martial arts. His ability to counter his opponents is truly off the charts, and even in fights that he's struggling in, he can always find a home for this deadly weapon. Packed with power, precision, and an amazing sense of timing, there was a point when Conor's left was the most famous weapon in the sport, period. Bas Rutten, the liver shot. Bas Rutten came from a form of MMA that didn't allow for closed fist punches to the face, but he certainly was allowed to land punches to the midsection. And so, he developed one of the most amazing body punches the sport has ever seen. Rutten would hit his heavyweight contemporaries so hard that you'd find yourself worried for the health of their internal organs. A tough fighter can bite down on his mouthpiece and put on a poker face when their chin gets tested, but a clean body shot is something you just can't stand up after. And Rutten was arguably the best. Lyoto Machida, the crane kick. Lyoto Machida only scored one crane kick knockout in his entire career, but it was a KO of such huge significance to the sport that we couldn't leave it off this list. Machida channeled his inner Karate Kid with this finish, finding a home for the perfect feint and follow-up kick that caught his opponent Randy Couture completely off guard. And it makes sense. Why would he expect to see this type of technique even attempted inside the cage? This was the very definition of a one-off. Matt Hughes, the slam. Matt Hughes was one hell of a force atop the welterweight division during his prime years. And one of his trademarks, something you just never see these days, was his habit of hoisting his opponent high over his head and slamming them down to the canvas. This looks like something you'd see in the pro wrestling ring, and yet Hughes was known to do this whenever the opportunity struck. He was so good at slamming his opponents that he even knocked out the former champion Carlos Newton with one in a fight. And who can forget when he launched Frank Trigg into the air in one of the greatest comebacks of all time? Yeah, Hughes was just built differently, folks. Dan Henderson, the H-bomb. There was something truly special about Dan Henderson's biggest punch. Hendo already looks like he's carved out of stone. He has the physique of a man who was always bound to possess huge power. But the step and overhand that he's best known for is one of the most violently thrown punches in MMA history. He swings that punch like it's on a steel chain, and if you're looking for the cleanest example, look no further than this huge knockout of Michael Bisping at UFC 100. And though it wasn't an H-bomb, we also gotta give him props for that flying forearm smash that followed the initial knockdown. Henderson was one truly violent customer in his prime. Donald Cerrone, the head kick. He's not the only head kicker we'll be featuring in this video, but man, we couldn't talk about signature weapons without giving a mention to the great Donald Cowboy Cerrone. His head kick was an inevitable part of his best years in the sport, and though a lot of his opponents expected it, Cerrone was excellent at setting it up, using the diverse tools of his Muay Thai skill set to throw his target off the scent. And once his boxing, body kicks, and clinch work had started to take their toll, Cowboy would begin hunting for his signature move. And time again, we saw this lightweight and welterweight icon provide us with thrilling highlight reel moments, thanks to the sudden and incredibly violent nature of his head kick. Jon Jones, the elbow. Jon Jones's use of his razor-sharp elbows is not confined to his amazing spinning strikes. Sure, we all remember the most dramatic examples of him scoring with a huge spinning elbow, but he also uses them tremendously well on the mat with ground and pound, while also working them into his clinch game, and just generally when he steps into range. Jones uses his elbows better than any fighter to ever do it, and while they only represent one portion of his game, they're certainly a very important part of his success. Alex Pereira, the left hook. Alex Pereira's left hook was already among the world's greatest fighting weapons in the sport of kickboxing, so it's only natural that it translated over to 4-ounce gloves perfectly. The left hook is such an integral part of the boxing arsenal, but while it's certainly used in MMA, seeing Poatan landed with that whip-like speed and accuracy, it's the type of perfect fluid motion that really has no equal. It's not a stretch to say that Pereira's left hook is probably the deadliest punch in MMA today, and we're confident that he can knock out most heavyweights with it if he landed clean. Georges St-Pierre, the jab, as a weapon in MMA, is nothing close to the type of foundational tool it is in boxing. Most fighters will throw it out there simply to gauge distance or disrupt their opponent, but the manner in which the great Georges St-Pierre implemented a strong jab into his arsenal was truly revolutionary. GSP sat down on this lightning-fast punch and used it with a strange, offbeat timing to keep his opponents guessing. It's not a stretch to say that he won several fights of his on the back of this one weapon, and though his blast double leg is also a signature weapon, his ability to jab was so unique to him at the time that we had to put it on this list. Ronda Rousey, the armbar. Arguably the most famous submission in MMA to the wider mainstream world was, of course, the armbar of Ronda Rousey, a weapon she used time and time again to carve out her position as the most dominant women's MMA fighter of her era. Using this one unavoidable technique, Rousey basically kicked the doors in and followed women to find their way into the UFC, just a matter of years after Dana White said it would never happen. But Ronda was marketable as hell, and her ability to find the armbar time and time again was pretty damn impressive, even if her eventual fall from grace was quite ugly. Mirko Cro Cop, the head kick. Right leg hospital, left leg cemetery. You know you have some major notoriety when there's an actual saying attached to your abilities as a kicker. And while Mirko Cro Cop could destroy legs and ruin midsections with his kicks, we all know him best for his abilities as a head kicker, a man who dropped and finished some of the most famous athletes of his era. Cro Cop was and probably still is the most impressive example of someone whose reputation for one select weapon preceded them every time they fought. Cro Cop's highlight reel is one extremely destructive piece of viewing material, and the fact that he's also had success in kickboxing tells you everything you need to know.